You're listening to episode 71 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Stephanie Paver about how to use Dutch testing to overcome hormone challenges like PCOS and infertility. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and today's guest is someone who I've gotten to know over the last few months as a member of my Nutrition Business Accelerator and my Inner Circle Mastermind. She's someone who really impresses me for a variety of reasons. One is that she's so knowledgeable about hormone health and just the science behind functional and integrative health for women. And the other piece that inspires me so much about this guest is how committed she is to getting her clients great results, whether that's overcoming their PCOS symptoms or getting pregnant. But before we get into this interview today, I wanted to share with you that I'm running a free training for nutrition entrepreneurs on Thursday, March 4th. The training's called The 3 Keys of a Six-Figure Nutrition Business. And in it, I'm going to teach you how to fill your online nutrition business with high-paying ideal clients without spending hours on social media. Now, this training is for you if you're a new nutrition business owner who wants to build your business the right way, if you're an established nutrition business owner who wants more high-paying clients so you can reach your first 6 figures of revenue and beyond, or if you're an advanced nutrition entrepreneur who's ready to scale your business from one-to-one to one-to-many. I'm going to show you the 3 core elements of a successful nutrition business, which if you're missing just one of them, you're not going to have a successful business, whether it's 6 figures or not. You'll learn the 5 big mistakes that so many nutrition entrepreneurs are making when they're trying to grow an online business and what you should do instead. I'll share with you why I don't teach my students to use Instagram to grow their business, which is kind of controversial, I know, but I promise it'll make sense when you come. And I'm also going to show you my 5-step strategy for building a nutrition business the right way so you can grow your income and your impact more quickly and easily than ever before. Now, if you show up live for this free training, you'll get a free nutrition business audit that you can use to check on your business's health and make the necessary changes to optimize it. If you're interested in joining this training, you can go to lauraschoenfeld.com/3keys. That's the number 3, KEYS. And you can register now for this masterclass that we're going to be doing about how to grow your 6-figure online nutrition business. I'm going to show you how to build your business the right way so you can create the income and impact that you desire. So go to lauraschoenfeld.com/3keys to secure your spot for the free live training. All right, so now that I told you about that, let's get back to the interview. My guest today is Stephanie Paver. Stephanie is a women's health dietitian with a virtual private practice. She specializes in helping women with PCOS use functional nutrition to achieve regular healthy periods so they can get pregnant successfully. Unlike conventional fertility treatments that rely solely on medication, Stephanie helps women prepare their bodies for pregnancy using personalized and evidence-based testing, nutrition, and lifestyle solutions. One way she does this is with Dutch testing. The Dutch test helps us to visualize the complex orchestra of hormones and identify which ones are out of harmony in hormone-driven challenges like PCOS and infertility. With this information, we can be precise at targeting the root cause and implement personalized strategies for healing. With clinical roots and an open mind to time-honored food traditions, Stephanie is a forward thinker and a progressive healthcare provider for over 10 years. Yoga, strength training, and brisk walks, in addition to daily home-cooked meals, journaling, meditation, and a strict sleep schedule, are essential elements in her hormone maintenance routine. In her free time, Stephanie enjoys reading, taking nature walks, and supporting farmers markets and other local businesses. So if you know anything about me, you can see why I get along with Stephanie so well. I love how passionate she is about serving her clients. And she's also just an awesome entrepreneur. Having worked with her as a business coach, just watching how quickly she takes action and how willing she is to experiment with things is just something that really makes me so happy. And it's so fun to work with her because she's such an action taker. So all of that said, Stephanie is super knowledgeable about PCOS, about fertility, and all the different types of hormone issues that can affect a woman's ability to get pregnant. And on today's episode, we're especially going to talk about that Dutch test and what you can learn from doing a Dutch test that standard labs can't tell you. All right, well, without further ado, I'm super excited to have with me on the show, Stephanie Paver. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Stephanie Paver. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Stephanie.
Hey, Laura. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Well, and for any of our listeners who don't know who you are, I would love for you to give just a quick introduction to yourself and specifically tell us your story about how you became so passionate about helping women with PCOS to get pregnant.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have a little bit of a not so linear journey to where I am today. So I'm going to kind of give a few highlights of my past to illustrate how I got here. So I spent the first part of my career in oncology. And it's funny because when I was working in that space, there's a lot of kind of sadness and loss. There's also a lot of inspiration and joy, but there tends to kind of be some sadness with working with, cancer patients. And at one point in my career, I thought to myself, I'm going to work in fertility or pregnancy because it just seems like a happier, type of area where you're really trying to bring life into the world versus kind of being on the other side of the spectrum, if you will. And so it was just funny that I kind of had that light bulb moment at one point because I wasn't working in fertility. I didn't have any experience in this area. In oncology, at one point, I was working with reproductive cancers, female reproductive. So I was working a lot with uterine and endometrial and ovarian cancer. And I had a specific patient who really kind of had an impact on me. So she was a 30-year-old female. And I can't even tell you, I think she had endometrial cancer. Can't even remember. But what I do remember is that she had PCOS. And she was 300 pounds. And the whole team looked at me as if it was like they were waiting for me to get this woman to lose weight. And that was just a really interesting experience because I felt helpless. Like I honestly did not know how to help this woman. I didn't understand PCOS then like I do today. And it was frustrating because when I would sit and talk with her in our consults, she wasn't eating. Like she was maybe eating 1,000 calories a day. And so when everyone's looking at me and kind of telling me like, it's up to me to get this woman to lose weight, I'm like, I don't know how. And I had done the adult weight management certification. I had all these advanced certifications, but like I didn't have the tools and it was just frustrating. So that experience always had an impression on me. Well, then kind of fast forward when I was going through graduate school. So I'd been working as a dietitian for several years, probably 5 or 6 before I went to grad school. Went back to graduate school, was fortunate enough to do some genomics, master's class in nutrigenomics. And at that same time, that kind of converged with when I was kind of really looking more into functional nutrition. And it really just opened my eyes because I was able to look through a different lens around genetics, genomics, nutrition, biochemistry. And it really made me kind of take a step back and be like, we are missing the boat here, people. Like when it comes to conventional medicine, when it comes to conventional nutrition, we were just looking at things too narrowly. And I felt like there was so much more we could be doing for patients. So that all happened. And then I got to a point in my kind of own health where I had stopped birth control, did the whole thing, no period. I was gaining weight. I felt like I had a basketball in my stomach all the time, couldn't fit into any of my clothes. And, I was working in oncology still. So I was friends with the doctors I worked with. So I would be like talking to the GI doctor or the oncologist that I worked with. And like, no one was able to like help me. So I was like getting CT scans and ultrasounds and like nothing was wrong, but yet I'm gaining weight. I'm constipated. I'm miserable. Like, I don't know what's going on with my hormones. Come to find out, learning on my own, like being on the birth control shuts down ovulation. It's normal not to get a period. Like, so all of the hormonal stuff kind of happened to me and I had to figure it out kind of on my own, if you will. I did enlist the help of a naturopathic doctor, at which point she suggested I had PCOS. But of course, looking back on it, I didn't have the proper workup. And it was just kind of, I think, an experience that happens to a lot of people. You go into the doctor, you give them what your symptoms are, and they kind of throw this diagnosis at you without really a full workup. So that was frustrating. And then kind of fast forward, once I ended up getting laid off from my oncology job because there was job cuts. And so in that time frame when I was trying to figure out what do I do, I didn't know kind of where to turn. I didn't want to be in that kind of conventional hospital setting anymore. I really knew I wanted to do something more with functional nutrition. Like, I just was so lost. I didn't know kind of where to turn. That's when I decided to start my private practice. And kind of serendipitously in that time, I started working with people with PCOS. And so I really realized how much it responded to diet and lifestyle intervention. But I also realized at that time, the big gaps in medicine when it comes to PCOS, because patients would come to me, they would tell me that their doctor told them to lose weight and exercise, or to cut calories and exercise more. And like, we're talking like 26-year-old females eating 1,000 calories a day and working out 6 days a week. And I was just like, my mind was blown by how underserved these women were being in the medical community. So that really inspired me to work more with that population. And then as I started kind of marketing to them more and getting more women with PCOS, then it just kind of happened where a lot of these women were like in this life stage where they're looking to get pregnant, right? So it just, again, kind of organically happened where I started working with women with PCOS and infertility, helping them get pregnant, really enjoying the opportunity to work alongside and partner with these women to watch them get some information and just thrive, with the right type of guidance. And so that, kind of in a nutshell is like how I got to where I am today.
I love it. And I really appreciate that it came from such a different angle with the oncology dietetics. It's almost like, just that one moment that you had that allowed you to start learning more about hormones and PCOS and all of that stuff. Like, because it is such a different, like, fertility and cancer is almost like a completely different. If you think about like cancer, the goal is to stop growth. And in fertility, it's like to enhance growth. So it's almost like the exact opposite type of field. But it's really cool that that's how you ended up working with women with PCOS. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that when you were getting help with some of the hormonal issues that you were dealing with, and then also working with other patients, that you feel like you didn't get enough appropriate testing to really figure out what was going on. Can you tell me a little bit more about why testing is such an important part of a woman's either hormonal health or their fertility journey in general?
Yeah, I feel like, so in my kind of practice, in my viewpoint, the testing is important. So for two things. Number one, so we know what we're working with. And number two, so that the basic elements of health don't get overlooked. So, kind of from a fertility standpoint, and I guess just from a hormone standpoint, your period and your fertility is an overall indicator of health. So I think it's important that we do a thorough exploration to figure out what's going on so that we can intervene appropriately. And a good example of this from a fertility standpoint would be iron. So something that I see so often is these women, again, on these like many years worth of journey, right? So they've been struggling and they come to me, and because I have my, kind of checklist of labs that I always want to make sure people are getting or that I'm like looking for. And like iron levels, ferritin, so the stored form of iron, so many women do not have a robust ferritin level. And research shows that ferritin should be at least 50 milligrams per deciliter for good fertility. And so even just something as basic as checking an iron level with the ferritin, like this isn't happening. When it comes to hormone health and fertility, the thyroid is so important. And once again, so many women are either they're not getting the proper workup for thyroid, or they're not getting worked up at all. And so I just feel like if we're not doing the right testing, if we're not doing adequate testing, we can overlook some really low-hanging fruit. And then that puts people on kind of just a longer than necessary, arduous journey. And so I'm talking like we need to be covering our bases on what's the basics of health. Even a good example with that is vitamin D. So vitamin D levels are going to impact fertility. They're going to impact PCOS. They're going to impact energy. Like vitamin D impacts everything, right? So if you're going into your doctor and they're not checking your vitamin D level on an annual basis, there's a problem, right? And so it's just basic things like that. And then more specifically, when it comes to hormones, and PCOS. So PCOS is kind of its own like beast, but we do want to make sure that we are getting appropriate hormone tests so that we know, once again, what we're working with. Is it, that you have high testosterone, you have high DHEAS, that's going to help point where's the origin of the androgens coming from. Do you have insulin resistance? Like what are we working with? And so it's going to help make a person's journey less complicated. And also it's going to help make treatment more effective when we know what we're working with.
It's pretty wild that you're having clients come to you that they haven't even had basic things looked at. Like
Yes.
I look at vitamin D and iron as being like, that doesn't even sound very controversial to me.
Yes, I know. It's amazing to me as well. And I don't understand where the breakdown is, but I even have some women come to me with a diagnosis of PCOS and no labs, like legit. And I'm like, well, PCOS is a diagnosis of exclusion. So you would have had to rule some of these other things out, these other diagnoses. So by way of that, there should be some labs, you know what I mean? And so I think, once again, a lot to my experience, which to the naturopath doctor who I worked with, to her credit, I mean, she did do some lab work, but it was kind of when I stepped into her office and she's like throwing out this, suggested diagnosis of PCOS. And then kind of looking back on the experience, I don't think I had all the appropriate blood work. But anyway, so I think it's important that we have the blood work so we know what we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, you would think that this would be stuff that would just be naturally included in somebody's workup or investigation into their health, but it's pretty nuts. Like this is a little bit off topic, but it is kind of crazy how even just getting basic labs done, unless you're really good at asking for them or if you have the right kind of provider. Because I remember I sent my husband in to get like a basic checkup and I told him like, ask for this, ask for that. Like I remember vitamin D was an example, right? Like you would think, and maybe this year, we're recording this in 2020. So maybe, with COVID happening, doctors will start testing vitamin D. But the doctor said to my husband, oh, you're pretty tan. You probably are fine. You don't need your vitamin D checked. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, that's ridiculous. So it's just crazy how so many doctors just like, there's no interest in certain lab values that, and again, would, in my mind, seem very obvious. Like, testing things like vitamin D doesn't seem that bizarre, but it's just nuts to me how, the way that our conventional medical system works, those things aren't looked for and they're not valued. So as far as misunderstandings or myths, like just the lack of clarity around PCOS that so many people have. I know that I have not been diagnosed with PCOS, but I definitely have like what I would call PCOS tendencies in air quotes. I will start to have the symptoms of PCOS when I'm under more stress or, a lot of different things can show up for me, but I've never been officially diagnosed. So I wouldn't say that I have PCOS, but I do think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what PCOS is in the general population, and also understanding how fertility plays into a person with PCOS. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the myths or misconceptions that a lot of women are believing around PCOS, especially how it relates to their fertility?
PCOS is a condition of androgen excess and ovulatory dysfunction. There are going to be elements, there's going to be factors, there's going to be things that are going to drive, both of those, the androgen excess. And the androgen excess is partly why there's ovulatory dysfunction, but there's going to be, a whole host of things going on. I think that number one, women with PCOS, I kind of hesitate to say this. I feel like there's many women with PCOS who don't fully understand the diagnosis because no one has educated them. Because when I'm working with someone and I'm getting their full history and I'm starting to explain to them what I'm seeing and I'm connecting the dots and I'm explaining their labs and I'm giving them education about their condition, in just the first 90-minute session, they're like, oh my gosh, I've learned so much. So I think number one, there's just a lack of education around what is PCOS? And then what does that mean for you? And how is it showing up for you? I think that many women kind of mistakenly believe that they have to be in this perfect weight range or this perfect BMI. Yes, it is true that losing, 5 to 7% of your body weight is going to help you with many things, particularly insulin, sensitivity, and going to bring down your glucose and your insulin and even inflammation and things. But there are many, many women who have lost weight and they still don't get their period back, right? So I think one of the myths is that you have to be in this perfect body weight category or BMI category, and then you're going to just magically be fertile or magically get your period back. And it doesn't work that way for many people. I think another big myth is that there's one solution, right? So PCOS is a lifestyle disorder, if you will. So it's really and this is all disease, but it's kind of your environment superimposed on your genetics. So you have a genetic predisposition and now you have environmental factors that are causing the expression of symptoms or of a disease, right? And I think mistakenly, again, a lot of women feel like they have to focus on one thing. So it's either the diet or it's the exercise. Maybe they try to fuse both of them, but really with PCOS, it is lifestyle. So you can't really discount the stress management. You can't discount the sleeping piece of it. You really have to look at it in total and as a whole. And then another thing that I find, particularly with fertility, is that it's an either or when it comes to either I'm going to use lifestyle medicine to get pregnant or I'm going to use medication. And that breaks my heart because research shows that when it comes to fertility, what you eat, the lifestyle piece, it all matters. It matters for egg quality. It matters for time to conception. And nobody's saying not to get conventional treatment. But what I urge people is instead of forcing your body into do something it's not ready to do, let's support your body along the way. And then if we need to use, medical treatment, we can. But let's be sure that we're doing everything we can to support you, kind of physiologically, mentally, spiritually, physically. So, and then I would say the last really big myth is that women with PCOS, I think some women think they can't get pregnant, or that just in general, you can't get pregnant with PCOS. And that's just a really bad, wrong myth. It's just a myth, right? You can very much get pregnant. You can get pregnant naturally. It is doable for you. So for any woman who feels like she's been told, because unfortunately, and this is heartbreaking to me, when women come to me and they say, I went to my doctor, they said I have PCOS. And then in the next breath, they're like, oh, and you're probably going to need IVF. And I'm like, really? Who leads with that, right? And so that's not okay. If you have PCOS, you very well can get pregnant. You very well can do it naturally. And you very much do not have to be on a restrictive diet in order to achieve all of these things.
Yeah. I feel like that, oh, you have PCOS, you'll probably need fertility treatment. It's just, yeah, well, and especially because I feel like, first of all, fertility treatment can be outrageously expensive. So that's really, stressful for somebody to think oh, if you ever want to have a baby, get ready to spend $30,000 to $60,000. Right. And then also just, even if insurance covers it, it's just that level of medical force that a lot of times IVF ends up creating in the body without really doing what you were saying with supporting the body's ability to, be as fertile as possible, even if it does require medical intervention, getting your body to a place where it can support a pregnancy and, not have a miscarriage and that kind of thing. Like if you're going to go through those treatments, I think is so important. And it just shocks me how people will just go straight to like, oh, you'll need fertility treatment. Like take birth control now to get a regular period. And then when you're ready to get pregnant, we'll just do some kind of fertility treatment.
Exactly. And then you run into the scenarios with women doing all the things that they were told, right? So doing the Clomid, doing the shots, doing all these interventions, and then they might get pregnant and then they miscarry. Well, again, did we do our due diligence at the beginning of this journey to make sure that all of our bases were covered again? So why are you miscarrying? And I know that the miscarriage, especially for the first, there's a high, it's not uncommon, right? But the problem that I have is when, once again, there's been a lack of workup, there's been a lack of covering our bases. And then we're just pushing people into getting pregnant. And then now this becomes a 5-year journey of them getting medical intervention and either nothing's happening or they're having loss after loss.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I know that one of the things that can lead to pregnancy loss in women with PCOS is low progesterone. And that's something it's been a while since I worked with someone in that capacity. So I don't know at this point if it is something that they're typically testing, but I know that knowing your hormone balance before getting pregnant can be so important to making sure that your body is prepared to sustain the pregnancy, not just get pregnant. And I know that you use what's called the Dutch test, which is the dried urine. Oh, I forget what the T and the C. Do you remember what the T and the C stands for?
Yeah.
Is it just test?
Test for comprehensive hormones.
There we go. I was like, I was way overcomplicating that T. So the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones is the Dutch test. I always like to explain that because I feel like people think Dutch means like Dutch, the nationality, but it is a dried urine test for hormones. And that's a test that I use very often with my clients as well when I was working with health clients. And so I would love to talk about why you use the Dutch test with your fertility clients and what kind of information that can provide to help women with PCOS in their journey, not only improving their health, but also to get pregnant.
Yeah. And one thing before I jump into that, I just want to say, going back to what you said about the progesterone and, low progesterone can be a cause of miscarriage. I just want to say that I think it's important, to your point, that women know their levels kind of ahead of time, because then they can advocate for themselves. And I have had women who have gone to their doctors and been like, you need to put me on progesterone, during my pregnancy due to sustain levels. We need to be checking levels, right? So I also think that the data, having the objective data, is going to enable women to advocate for themselves, to go into the doctor and say, look, this is my body. This is the typical thing for me. What can you do to support me? Or this is what I need from you to support me, right? And then if your doctor is not willing to do that, then you have to find another provider, essentially. So just wanted to say that having the data ahead of time can help empower you to get the treatment that you do need. But then going back to the question about why I'm using the Dutch test with my patients. So for all the women who have tried everything, right? They cannot find relief from their symptoms. They've been struggling with fertility challenges. These women will come to me saying that something is off internally. And that's the words they use, like something is off. And a lot of people are using kind of the terminology, I want to get to the root cause of what's going on. So the Dutch test helps it's kind of a window into their biochemistry so that it can explain what is going on so that we know what to treat. And I'm going to give some examples. So, but before I give examples, the kind of in short, the Dutch test coupled with a patient's other blood work. So I'm using blood work that they get from their doctors. Either I'm sending them to their doctor to get blood work or they're bringing me what they have. That coupled with the Dutch test helps me to kind of, complete the outline of the canvas. And then using the patient's story, I can start to color in the picture and I can kind of really see what's going on. And in other words, also the Dutch test helps me to identify kind of a subtype of PCOS. And that's really where we can start to talk about what's driving the PCOS, or kind of like what's the origin. And so the Dutch test is going to help me to see estrogen levels, progesterone levels, testosterone levels. It's going to help me to see how these things are being metabolized or broken down. So metabolism is just kind of a big word for saying when one substance gets converted into another substance. And so when I can see how the body is breaking things down, metabolizing, I can really better understand, again, biochemistry and pathways. And that's where we can use food as medicine. We can use nutrients as medicine, because you need nutrients for these biochemical pathways to happen. And we know that certain foods can help support certain pathways. And so this test is really going to give us a kind of full body and like across multiple systems, a view of like what's happening hormonally. And then really lastly, I think with the Dutch test, another important value of it is that, once again, I think the objective data helps women themselves to understand, once they can be educated on, this is what I'm seeing, this is what's happening, this is what drives this to happen. Now they can better understand, oh, my sleep patterns are affecting this, or my blood sugar level is dropping and that's why my cortisol is rising, or whatever, right? So it's going to help give us the evidence to show how lifestyle, and to really support the lifestyle factors, are going to help your hormonal balance.
Yeah. The Dutch test is one of these things where it's interesting. I feel like I've seen some more conventionally minded nutritionists saying that those kind of tests aren't helpful. And I'm like, I feel like I've had such great experience running them, not only on my clients, but also even in my own life, like being able to see some of the things that were showing up on my own Dutch test and being able to fix those. And it actually really does make a difference. So I don't know why there's some practitioners out there that don't feel like it's useful, but I feel like pretty much every person that I work with as a business coach that works with hormonal health runs the Dutch test. So I feel like there's a reason that they're doing that, right? So you mentioned with the PCOS subtypes, that being something that we can identify when we do a Dutch test. Now, I feel like those PCOS subtypes, that's another thing that I don't think a lot of doctors are really clarifying or like looking into. It's kind of like, oh, you have these couple of symptoms, you have these, things that are indicative of PCOS, so we'll just call it PCOS. And like you said earlier, when you were talking about the myths, that usually they're going to give like kind of a one size fits all. Here's what you do with PCOS. You do low carb and you do, more exercise or whatever. And depending on the type of PCOS, obviously that's going to very much affect how that intervention either works or doesn't work, or possibly even causes problems. So what kind of stuff are you looking for on the Dutch test to help you identify the subtype of PCOS, like the specific reason that woman is experiencing those symptoms?
Love this question. Okay, so one of the main things I'm looking at is the adrenal output. So basically your adrenals are an organ in your body, and we have two, and they put out hormones. And so one of the hormones is called DHEAS, dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate. And that is going to come almost exclusively, the DHEAS with the S at the end is coming exclusively from the adrenals. DHEA comes from mostly the adrenals, a little bit from the ovary. But anyway, so when we're looking at DHEAS, if that's coming solely from the adrenal gland, and so that's an androgen. Okay, so when we talk about male sex hormones, there's going to be multiple androgens. An androgen is the name for male sex hormone. So DHEAS is going to be one of the kind of parent androgens. There's going to be other androgens called testosterone. Most people know this one. And then the way that DHEAS and testosterone get metabolized or broken down, those are still going to be different androgens yet. So their metabolites make more androgenic compounds. One of the things I love seeing is when women have a really high DHEAS, which is a parent androgen, but their testosterone is low or normal. And so what that is going to indicate to me is that the bulk of their androgen output is coming from the adrenals. And so that is telling us that we need to make sure we are targeting specifically kind of that stress response. So the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is how somebody, perceives and responds to stress. And so if DHEAS is off the charts, that's the androgen that could be causing some of these symptoms of androgen excess, like facial hair growth, hair loss, cystic acne. I see this like a lot where DHEAS is off the charts, testosterone is normal. That type of picture is going to really point to more of an adrenal type PCOS. And our interventions are going to be very much about, again, stress management, making sure that you are eating at regular intervals so that your blood sugars aren't all over the place. If your blood sugars are too high or too low, if they're kind of wonky, that is going to that's a stressor on the body. So that is going to cause more cortisol and DHEA output. And so that's one thing. Another thing that we can kind of see is when you have, as I was mentioning, the metabolites, so how testosterone is being broken down, how DHEAS is being broken down, we can see down which pathways they're going. And some pathways are going to be more androgenic, meaning that they're going to have more of a kind of biologic activity that mimics testosterone. So you're going to have these same androgenic symptoms. And so for something like that, we can target those biochemical pathways with like spearmint tea, for example, or saw palmetto, or some type of herbal androgen blocker. And then another thing that I'm seeing as well, I love talking about this, so if you need to cut me off, but I look a lot at the cortisol patterns, because what this can show us is that, for example, if someone has low saliva cortisol, so what they're kind of putting out in response to stress, if that's low, and then also their total kind of output, what's called the metabolized cortisol. So what they're putting out totally and they're metabolizing is also low. This can show me that there might be some hypothyroid going on. If cortisol levels are high, it could show that there could be some blood sugar dysregulation issues. There could be some sleep disturbance issues. So kind of, again, this is where I was saying that the Dutch test will kind of outline the canvas and the patient story colors in the picture, because I can look at the Dutch test and I can say, okay, this, or this could be happening, but I'm not going to know until I go back to the patient and get their story and understand, how are they sleeping? How are they stressing? Are they eating? How are they eating? Are they skipping meals? Right. So I have to be able to put the whole picture together. So the cortisol pattern can tell me a lot about, it can kind of give me a glimpse into, is there hypothyroid? Is there infection going on? Is there potentially, again, seeing these different pathways, insulin resistance. So we're able to, again, get a better picture of what's happening.
And then I would imagine you can bring in some of that blood work to then confirm some of those hypotheses, like, oh, this looks like someone who might have some hypothyroidism. Obviously, you can then go confirm it with more investigative blood work.
Absolutely.
So I know that you said before we jumped on the recording that you wanted to do a case review to cover an example of how the Dutch test has helped you guide an intervention with a specific patient. So I think it would be cool to hear how you actually use this information in a very specific example.
Yes. I'm excited. Okay. So I have a case study that I wanted to present because I think this can help relate more to people. So I have a patient, I'm maybe around 26 years old. She came to me with weight issues. So she's been gaining weight, mood issues, including depression and anxiety, acne, energy problems, right? So can't get out of bed, really hard time getting through the day. And then she also is having a little bit of dermatitis, so some skin inflammation and IBS. So interestingly, in her past history, she was diagnosed with PCOS and Hashimoto's thyroiditis at the same time. And Hashimoto's, for people who don't know, is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid that is pretty much like a hypothyroid situation. But then she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, for which she had her thyroid removed. And so the interesting thing about this is that hypothyroid is a condition that needs to be ruled out first when PCOS is suspected, because it can cause issues with ovulation and it can cause many of the other mood and energy issues that we often see in PCOS, right? So This person that I'm working with, I said, make sure we're talking to the endocrinologist. So it is really important, as a clinician and as a dietitian, that I'm not working in a silo, right? So I am making sure that this patient has a healthcare team. She's got some good healthcare providers. And then I'm doing my best to either communicate directly with them or communicate with them through the patient. So we had the conversation that she's seeing her endocrinologist regularly and has confirmed that her thyroid levels are good. And then therefore her medication is fine. Okay. So I'm setting the stage because I'm going to come back to the thyroid. So we ended up doing the cycle mapping plus. And so the cycle mapping is when she's doing a urine collection, basically 15 days out of the month over like 30 days. And so it helps us to see how her hormones are fluctuating. And it helps us to see, is she ovulating? So when we got her results, the interesting thing about it was that it did in fact show that she did not ovulate. However, her pre-ovulatory estrogen or her follicular estrogen, so in that first phase of the cycle, her estrogen levels were good. So she actually had a peak estrogen. It came down nicely. So estrogen is needed for ovulation to happen. So for estrogen levels, they weren't too high, weren't too low. They're happening okay. So why is she not ovulating is the big question. Keeping in mind that low thyroid can be a factor here, although, again, her doctor said she's dialed in. So stress and undereating can also be a factor when it comes to not ovulating. So then looking at her androgens, again, those male sex hormones, she actually had low normal testosterone. And this was interesting because, again, she was having these symptoms of acne, cystic acne, and she had within range DHEAS, so that other parent compound, that parent androgen. And her doctor had put her on spironolactone and her acne got better. So there was something about how she was metabolizing. Well, the Dutch test shows us that. So we can see, looking at DHEAS, looking at testosterone, how she's breaking these compounds down. And she did, in fact, have a preference for the 5-alpha reductase pathway, which we know is more androgenic. So from there, really what I was able to kind of discern is that her androgens aren't off the charts. She must just really be sensitive at the tissue level. And she does well with the androgen blockers. So saw palmetto, she's still on spironolactone, but we did end up adding a little bit of some herbal support for that. And then also spearmint tea can be helpful. When we looked at her estrogen levels and her metabolites, they looked good. So she was making good estrogen, she was breaking them down appropriately, and she was methylating, which is a whole nother kind of part of the test that we didn't talk a lot about, but it's really showing us a bit of detoxification. And methylation, just since I'm on the topic, it is important, particularly if women are having multiple miscarriages, if people are having a family history of, let's say, like heart disease and cancer, like methylation could really be problematic. And again, I don't think this is something that's being talked about enough in the fertility space. So even something as simple as MTHFR, like this is something you can easily ask your doctor for. But anyway, so going back to this patient, so then we looked at her cortisol levels, and contrary to, when you go to your doctor and you say, can you check my cortisol? Your doctor might be amenable, but they're going to do one blood test, one kind of snapshot in time. And what the Dutch test shows us, it's a whole profile of your daily cortisol production and kind of the whole pattern for the day. So it's going to give us a lot better of a picture. It's going to help us to kind of see on paper how you feel, right? So if you're feeling sluggish throughout the day, if you can't get out of bed, if it takes you 2 hours to wake up in the morning, if you're dragging in the afternoon, and now we can see that cortisol pattern, and we can see maybe it's really low, maybe you don't have a cortisol awakening response, or maybe you're dropping down in the afternoon, your cortisol is too low and it shouldn't be. Now we know, once again, we need to kind of target your body's production of cortisol. And also then we have to look at, how did you get here? Are you kind of like past the stress response? You've kind of like burned out kind of a thing. So we have to really kind of take into consideration the past experiences to understand what we're dealing with today and why we're dealing with it, and then start to heal it. In this case with cortisol, adaptogens can be very helpful. So people may have heard of like ashwagandha, rhodiola, these types of herbs. But anyway, what we saw in this patient's cortisol pattern was not only did she have really low salivary cortisol, and what that again means is basically it was showing me how she feels throughout the day, which is tired. Her stress response was not very quick, in other words. And then also the total cortisol that she was making and metabolizing was low. So like everything about this is screaming hypothyroid to me, right? And so the interesting thing here is that she's already done, right? She's done her due diligence and talking to the endocrinologist. He did the testing, thyroid's okay. And I'm kind of sitting here saying like, I really think we need to have a conversation around your thyroid. You don't have a thyroid, so she's only getting Synthroid, which is T4. So maybe we need to add a little bit of T3. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is that I'm thinking that we need to do something better for her thyroid. So I think that's all very like, to me, that's so powerful to be able to see kind of, again, multiple aspects. And like, you're not just looking at one blood work at one point in time, right? Like you're really understanding someone's like biochemistry and kind of like physiology. And I just think it's so much more informative for us to see what's happening versus just taking a thyroid level, a TSH, and being like, oh, you're normal. You know, it's like, no, I feel like crap. I have no energy, all the things. And so we can't just tell a patient she's normal when she's like clearly not like feeling normal, right? So the other things I did here with this patient, because the cortisol looks to need some help, we need to focus on mitochondrial function. So really helping to support the mitochondria, because that's where cortisol is made. And then from there, once you're making good cortisol, you might be able to then make good progesterone, because your cortisol, you make progesterone from the same backbone. Cholesterol is kind of used as a backbone, and you make cortisol and progesterone from the same pathway. So by kind of seeing these things, we can really pinpoint, okay, she's definitely going to need some androgen blockers. She's really going to need some mitochondrial function. I'm really supporting her adrenals because I think she's going to need a little bit of oomph to help her get through the day. And also the cortisol levels are really helping me understand why her mood is so depressed. Like she's depressed, she has anxiety. So all of these things, all of her symptoms are making sense.
I'm so curious. Did she end up getting any changes with their thyroid medication?
So not yet. So I haven't followed up with her yet. So this was more of a recent case that I thought was very interesting. That's why I wanted to share it. But so TBD, to be determined. I am going to fight for her though, and to make sure that she gets the support. I really think that's a big piece of the puzzle for her.
Did you say if they checked her free T3? We're both thinking this way. Like,
I'm laughing. So yeah, I'm laughing. So basically that the conversation with the endocrinologist was like managing it. And I had, I saw my doctor, everything's good kind of a thing. So there may be some missing labs. Yeah, that could tell us more.
I was going to say, I'm like, my brain immediately is like, okay, this woman doesn't have a thyroid. She should have the free T4 and free T3 levels checked, not just TSH. And I'm kind of surprised she's only on Synthroid. I feel like without a thyroid, I mean, that significantly affects your ability to produce T3. It's not totally impossible, obviously, but it's not easy.
Well, so for the audience, so T4 Synthroid, it needs to get converted into T3, which is biologically active, and you need good liver function. So of course, one of the other kind of things that I'm thinking as kind of the secondary approach for this patient, we will look at some liver function and make sure that her liver function looked okay based on what the Dutch test showed, but I still think she needs some support in that realm. But also from kind of an ovulation standpoint, so going back to the thyroid ovulation, she's not ovulating. I suspect her thyroid's problematic, but also she has a history of disordered eating. And that disordered eating presents as like a binge restrict type of a pattern. And so a large part of the conversation, again, as a dietitian, I'm really educating around the importance of, not counting calories, listening to your body, trusting your body, eating substantial meals, and not being afraid of carbs, so those are really going to be like highlights when it comes to like the nutrition picture.
Well, I'm super glad she's working with you because I feel like it sounds like nobody else is really giving her the level of attention and, quality of care that you're providing, which is sad. But I mean, it's crazy. Like, I feel like working with so many other nutrition business owners and seeing the effort and energy and time and thought they put into the way that they work with their clients. It's like, I wish all healthcare providers were doing this. And I know anytime somebody's taking insurance, it's going to affect whether or not they can really go to that level of depth because insurance doesn't cover a lot of the stuff that we like to do when we're in the functional space. But it's just like, I feel like somebody like that without someone like you in their corner would just be completely lost because there's nobody even looking at this stuff for them. And it's not the patient's fault. They don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know that they're not getting the full picture from their doctor or, any other provider that's working with them. So I'm just like kind of blown away. Like things that you and I are probably thinking seems really obvious is not even getting done. And the question is why? Anyway, that's kind of a little tangent. But like I said, I am glad that she's working with you because it's really great to have someone to be able to really go deep into what's going on and put the pieces of the puzzle together, connect the dots. Like, how is this all working together? And what does this tell us about what needs to be addressed? Because otherwise, like you said, if it's just up to the conventional endocrinologist, it's like, oh, your TSH is fine. You're fine. Your thyroid's fine. And it doesn't matter that she has clear signs and symptoms of it not being fine. So I get a little spicy.
Yeah, it makes me mad. Yeah. And that's what kind of fuels me is I want to help give women the information and empower them. Because once again, as I said at the beginning, once these women get the information they need, they thrive, right? I mean, they need support. We need to be supported. And so it makes me angry. And again, no fault to the physician because, they're working with the tools they have in their toolbox, right? And I know that
I'm like, I feel like this guy has more tools. He's got a few tools he's not using, but you're being kind.
Yeah, well, and yeah, so it makes me angry. But and I know that it's not acceptable at any age, but this particular patient, she's young. She shouldn't. It's not okay. It's just not okay, right? So I want to help. My goal is to help her and all of my patients to feel their best and achieve the thing. You can have it all, girl. Whoever's listening, you can have it all. You can have good health. You can have your hair growing. You can have clear skin. You can get pregnant. Like you can have all of this. It's very much your right and you're entitled to it. And I'm going to help you figure it out.
I love it. Well, I know that you have a really awesome free guide that you wanted to share with the listeners to help them get more clarity on where they're going, because as we talked about today, PCOS is something that is so inadequately discussed in the conventional system. And so you might have this diagnosis of PCOS, but really have no idea like what type of PCOS you have or what you should be doing to improve your PCOS. And I know that you have a really awesome free guide that can help with that. So you want to tell the audience about that?
Yes, thank you. And so my freebie is Your Fertility with PCOS Roadmap. And this guide will help you learn what your type of PCOS is and how it affects your fertility journey. And so that is available on my website as a download. StephaniePaverRD.com is the name of my website.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure to link to that in the show notes for episode 71. And where else can people connect with you, Stephanie? I know that they are probably having their minds blown with all this information and the level of scientific knowledge you have and the detail you go into with your clients and the way that you're able to connect the dots for people, I think is really awesome. So if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about working with you, where should they go?
They can find me on Instagram at Fertility with PCOS. And then also, and you can DM me through Instagram or, shout out at me. I'm also on Facebook, but honestly don't even know what my Facebook page is.
I only use Facebook for ads at this point. I'm like, I don't even know who uses Facebook anymore.
Yeah. So don't connect with me on Facebook. So go to Instagram at Fertility with PCOS. And then also you can get me through my website, StephaniePaverRD.com. You can, shoot me a message through the contact form, or if you are interested in scheduling a call with me, you can very easily do that from my homepage as well.
Awesome. And as far as I remember, I could be wrong, is your Instagram handle like have little dots or something?
It does. Am I supposed to say that? Yeah, it's at fertility.with.pcos.
Okay. We'll make sure the link's in the show notes. I just wanted to make sure, because if they just put fertility with PCOS with no periods in between, they won't find you. So I want to make sure that they can get you. So we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But you guys can also, I think, just search Stephanie Paver on Instagram and you should be able to find her that way. I think that's how it works. I feel like like an old lady when it comes to social media sometimes. So I'm not as active on it as some other people might be. Well, anyway, I really appreciate you coming on with us today, Stephanie. It was such a great opportunity to talk with you and get to hear your expertise better. And like I said, we'll make sure to link to all of those, the freebie and your website and your social media so that people can get in touch with you to learn more.
Thank you so much, Laura.
And I have one more little curveball question. I want to preface it with the fact that there's no wrong answer to this question. And that question is, what do you believe makes somebody more than a body?
Okay. I love this question because I listened to your podcast. So I think that what makes somebody more than a body is their energy and their energetic, the energy they radiate, right? And I feel like the energy that is radiated comes from their connection with a higher power, God, universe, whoever that is for you. I also feel like that connection to kind of a higher power also really helps to, for a lot of people, solidify our connection to ourselves and others, our relationships. So really kind of the totality of the energy that we're putting out in the world and our connection to, God, ourselves, and others.
I love it. I don't think anyone's ever answered it that way. So I love the visual of the energy coming down and going out. It's very cool. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. It was so awesome to chat with you. And thanks to our listeners for spending the last hour with us. It was really great to get to chat with you about this today. And we will look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a dietitian or nutritionist business owner that wants to create an online business that attracts, converts, and serves your dream clients? Then keep listening, because I have a special opportunity that will help you create the profitable, joy-filled nutrition business that you always wanted. In my signature group coaching program, the Nutrition Business Accelerator, you'll learn how to start, grow, and scale your online nutrition business to 6 figures and beyond, so you can experience the financial and time freedom that you desire. Inside the program, you'll learn how to attract high-paying clients who are excited to work with you and willing to pay you the rates you deserve. You'll get training on how to effectively sell your services in a way that feels authentic and converts prospects into paying clients without feeling pushy or salesy. And you'll get step-by-step instructions on how to create programs and services that provide transformative results, leading to glowing testimonials and referrals from your current clients so you can have the greater impact that you desire in the world around you. Inside the program, you'll get mentorship and guidance from me, a compassionate coach who's built her own multi-6-figure online nutrition business. So that way you never have to feel stuck in your business again. I created this program to help struggling dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs get clarity on who they serve, how they serve them, and how they can stand out in a crowded market so they can more easily attract dream high-paying clients into their online nutrition business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/NBA to learn more about the program and get on the wait list. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/NBA, which is short for Nutrition Business Accelerator. Doors are opening soon, and you don't want to miss out on this one-of-a-kind business coaching opportunity. Let's accelerate your nutrition business together. I'll see you in the program.